A very good morning to you. Welcome to the West Ham Voice on a Thursday morning. There are just over 3 weeks and three friendly games to go for Julen Lopetegui to get West Ham United prepared for the first game of the Premier League season against Aston Villa. Now, whilst Villa have been doing an awful lot of business in the transfer market, the feeling at West Ham is that everything is beginning to take quite long again. And it's beginning to engulf West Ham fans, and West Ham fans are beginning to worry. And should they be right to worry? Look, if you're new to the channel, please do hit that like button. Please hit the subscribe button as well. Free of charge to become a subscriber, and all my content is free as well. What I'm going to talk about today is all the latest transfer links. But the thing that's, I guess, is worrying West Ham United fans is that, like I just said, the feeling of deja vu. With the complete takeover of transfer business by Tim Steidten, I guess many of us must have thought that our pearl diver would have done his due diligence, and most of our targets would have already been with us. But that has yet to be the case. Now, look, if you include the signing of Andy Irving, who we got last summer and then went out on loan, we've got 4 new faces at the club. Not bad, I guess, but we've yet to see the arrival of key players, or in key roles, I should say. We know we need another right back. We know we need another centre back. We know we absolutely need a left-sided attacking winger. And of course, above all else, we need a striker. Will they happen? Well, look, I've been told that the panic button is not being hit just yet, that there's still plenty of time. Yes, okay, the league starts in 3 weeks' time, but there's still plenty of time before the summer transfer window shuts, which is at the end of August. So we've got well over a month to still get those players in. But as I said, in previous shows, Lopetegui talked about doing business early. I mean, we've heard this before, haven't we? We've heard it before about doing our business early in order to bed in all the new players so that they can hit the ground running when the new season starts. But that just doesn't seem to be materializing. Look, the squad are out in America at the moment for the US tour, which starts on Sunday against Lopetegui's old team, Wolverhampton Wanderers. And we've got quite a few of our international players back. We welcome back Soucek and Soufal, as well as, I think, Antonio the other day. And my understanding is that Paqueta and Jared Bowen, and I dare say Alphonse Areola, will also be joining the squad this coming weekend. So that'd be great. It'd be great to see, our big players back and in training and probably getting some game time as well. But what about new players? What about adding to the 4 new faces that we've currently got? Look, there's an awful lot of stories out there. So let's start with the striker search, striker targets. The story is ongoing about John Duran. It seems to now have come to a point where that there are negotiations still going on. We heard from John Duran's agent that West Ham United are indeed in the mix for the player. But we've also heard, he kind of left it open a bit, didn't he, in talking about, we see what happens with, he's thinking or hoping that there'll be potential other bids from other clubs. Aston Villa are continuing to demand a higher fee than West Ham are prepared to pay. We know all this. The player's agent has spoken out, confirmed that we're trying to negotiate a deal with the player. Now, whilst Villa want 40 million, West Ham are not prepared to go much higher than 35 million, which I believe is something like 31 million pounds plus add-ons. Now, after what seems to be a rather impressive spending spree by Aston Villa, they obviously need to recoup as much money back as they possibly can, and so that they don't get faced with PSR sanctions again, or the potential of PSR sanctions in the future. Now, earlier this week, it was reported that West Ham look to have found a breakthrough where a deal, apparently, of £31 million was mentioned. That was the figure that apparently was quoted to Napoli when they made the inquiry about the striker. However, that does not seem to be the case, with a senior source having said, we've been arguing over Duran's value for weeks. They want far too much money. West Ham still looks to be Duran's most likely destination. But how much longer do we hold out for this player until we decide to walk away and look at other options instead? Look, a breakthrough might be that there may be a hefty sell-on fee or a hefty sell-on clause that might be added to Aston Villa's requirements. But again, that doesn't really help them with the PSR situation that they may have to face, like I said, in the near future. So let's see what happens. I still think that this deal's going to happen. I still think we're gonna get it done. We'd rather have got it done sooner rather than later. But I think if we really want the player, we're going to have to bite the bullet and pay as much of that near 40 million that Aston Villa want. I really don't think we're going to end up paying that much. I think it will be agreed at 35, but it might be closer to 35 without any add-ons rather than, say, 30 with add-ons. So let's see what happens. Now, as much as many fans would love for West Ham to bid for Ivan Toney, despite his cost, West Ham are not, ready to or about to spend north of 40 odd million pounds for the 28-year-old striker, who's got just under a year left of his contract at Brentford. Now, some believe that Toney would immediately fire us back into Europe next season. That's quite possible. With his goal scoring record, it's quite likely. Now, that alone may be worth the money being spent on him. And unlike Duran, he's a proven goal scorer in the Premier League. I mean, he scored 12 goals in his debut season in the Premier League for Brentford. And then back in 21-22, which was in 21-22 season. And then he improved on that the season before last with 20 goals. All right, last season was not great for him. He missed a large chunk of it because of his ban. And he only managed to get 4 goals on his return. Now, if Brentford were to accept a more reasonable deal for a player who's got around 11 months left on his contract, then I dare say West Ham United and probably several other clubs would be most interested. I'm thinking around about £30 million, maybe 30 million with some add-ons as well. Now, Brentford, I think, were hoping to trigger a bidding war for the player. Chelsea were interested, but they've also walked away from any potential deal because Brentford are insisting on a fee nearer the 40, 45, 50 million pound mark. Now, it's quite a dangerous game for Brentford to play because Toney has kind of implied that he'd be happy to see his contract through and then walk away at the end of this coming season for nothing. Now, there is also a rumour that apparently he favours going to Spurs. I don't know how true that is, to be quite honest with you. But I guess time will tell. Now, there are a few clubs that should be interested in Ivan Toney, but it's the value that's the problem here. So let's see what happens. Would I like for us to bid for him? Look, he's 28 years of age. He'll be, it won't be till next year, March, when he hits 29. I dare say he'd be a fantastic player for us. But I just think that 40 million or more is just a little bit too rich for West Ham or most clubs for a player that's got 1 year left on his contract. Now, what about attacking players on the left side? We know, again, that's an area that we really need to sort out. And apparently, we've made a bid. A silly bid by the sounds of it for Crysencio Summerville. Apparently, we've submitted a £20 million fee with substantial add-ons for the left-sided attacking player. Look, this offer hasn't been confirmed, hasn't been corroborated just yet. And I've got a feeling West Ham wouldn't be that stupid, to be quite honest with you, to make such a low ball bid for a player that Leeds United value quite highly. Now, West Ham should indeed have an interest in this 22-year-old player. Last season, he scored 21 goals with 10 assists in 49 appearances. And the club are fully aware that with 2 years left on his current contract and with Leeds not really desperate to sell, any deal for the player, or any negotiations for the player could possibly drag on all the way through to the end of the transfer window, which definitely would not suit West Ham United. Uh, I don't know that. I mean, West Ham can play the long waiting game with some other targets, like I said, like Duran or like Toney. But when it comes to Summerville, I think there's going to be quite a few clubs that are going to be interested in him, and probably offer a lot more than West Ham are supposedly offered at £20 million. I think a likely bid of something like 30 million could prize the player away, or the late 20 odd million, 25, 26, 27 million with some hefty add-ons, maybe even a sell-on clause, and Leeds United will probably be happy to let the player go. And I think he'll probably be worth every penny that any team pays for him. Look, would we go for Summerville in a serious way? I think we should. I think he's definitely one of the few players left in the stuck in the Championship that definitely be worth an investment in. Now, unless of course they make an offer that Leeds can't turn down, Leeds will keep. Unless West Ham make an offer that Leeds can't turn down, Leeds will just keep hold of the player because he's still got a couple of years left on his contract, and like I said, they're in no rush to let him go. Now, right backs. Well, I mean, we're beginning to lose count of how many right backs that we're being linked to. And I talked on at the weekend about Alexis Saelemaekers. Look, our search for a right back continues, and Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Kyle Walker-Peters, now Saelemaekers. I'm going to mention a couple of others as well. Look, it looks as if AC Milan want to let the player go. Despite not having played in the right back role for some time, he could be considered as a right wing back. He's played on attacks on the left side of attack. He's played on the right side of attack. And the rumours are beginning to build up about our interest in the player. But he's not the only one that we've got new rumours on in terms of right backs in the last few days. Another right back is Bayern Munich's Nusa Mazraoui, and also Torino's Raul Bellanova. I'm going to show you a few stats to kind of compare these players because, interestingly, the one that stands out for me, or possibly two that stand out for me, are Kyle Walker-Peters and Aaron Wan-Bissaka. When you look at Mazraoui and the other player that we're linked to, Bellanova, in terms of their defensive qualities, they're not so great. It's players like Wan-Bissaka and Kyle Walker-Peters that are kind of taking prominence here in terms of their defensive abilities. Let's go back to Mazraoui because he's an interesting one at Bayern Munich. He missed a large chunk of last season because of injuries. He missed 19 games in total, twice from a torn muscle. However, the Moroccan international is said to be a target for several clubs who are looking to strengthen their right back area. Apparently, Man United are interested. We're interested, plus one or two others. However, West Ham might consider making a loan offer with an option or maybe an obligation to buy for this player who's valued at around £15 million. But it's suggested that the player himself would prefer a permanent move. Now, I'm worried about his, torn muscles. He's torn two separate muscles over the course of last season, like I said, having missed 19 games. So I'm beginning to wonder if this might be a little bit too much of a gamble. And then we move on to Bellanova. Now, despite being classed, it's a bit like Saelemaekers. He's classed as a right back, but he's played much of his time as right midfield or primarily as a right wing back. He's a great prospect great prospect going forward. This 24-year-old, he's got good pace, he's got physically strong, and he's improving on his defensive qualities. And I guess that's why he's more of an attack-minded wing back than he is as a proper right back. But as we know, Lopetegui encourages his fullbacks to venture forward, and Lopetegui will end up playing with three centre backs in order to compensate. Now, Torino apparently want around 25 million euros for the player. But I think a deal could possibly be struck for this player, maybe again, a bid of around 20 million euros plus add-ons. Apparently, Aston Villa are also interested in this player. Now, when it comes to Wan-Bissaka, I talked the other week about the wages that he's on. He's on about 90, £100,000 a week. But if we looked a little bit deeper into Wan-Bissaka's season, there might be a very good reason why Man United are quite desperate to let him go, apparently for as little as £10 million. Now, in the last two seasons at Man United, the right back missed a total of 29 games, 8 of which were in the 22-23 season, but a whopping 21 games were missed because of injuries last season. Now, Wan-Bissaka had 2 long spells out of the game, the first of which was from mid-September through to the end of October, where he missed 10 games because of a hamstring injury, and the second of which was down to an unknown injury, which kept him sidelined for 2.5 months from the beginning of the year, where he missed a further 11 games. Now, look, £10 million doesn't sound like a lot. Okay, he came back strong at the end of the season. But there are good reasons why clubs sometimes want to let a player go. And if their injury record is anything to go by for the likes of Mazraoui and Wan-Bissaka, I'd be a little bit hesitant to consider going for the player. 10 million is not a lot of money. All right, 90, £100,000 a week is quite substantial. If he gets injured for a long period of time again, that could be quite tricky. And what about centre-back targets? Well, in terms of Jean-Claire Todibo, I think we need to just drop this one once and for all. Despite West Ham having offered a total package of £35 million to Nice, the player himself clearly doesn't want to come to West Ham United and is still favouring Juventus. Now, interestingly, Juventus have now made a similar bid for the player, a loan to buy bid. However, Juventus are still not agreeing to the £35 million price tag that Nice have put on the player. So I think we should give up the ghost and look for alternative players. But it's interesting that the door is slightly ajar for us to perhaps come back in for Todibo if Juventus really cannot raise the funds or come to an agreement as to what the player is worth over the next couple of weeks. Keep an eye out for this one because Juve do not have the sort of cash to spend on this player, and they're even struggling to agree on a loan deal plus whatever Nice want them to pay for the player after the loan deal has ended. So, other players I mentioned on Monday. Malik Chow. Thank you to the viewer who told me how to pronounce Chow's name. I appreciate that. As you can see, it's spelt Thi. I wouldn't have had any clue that it's pronounced Chow. As mentioned on my Monday show, the rumours linking us to AC Milan's Chow are growing as a serious alternative to the chase for Fikayo Tomori, which I kind of said to be honest with you, I didn't really think that was a realistic target. And I consider Chow to be a much more realistic target. He's a great prospect at 22 years old and would cost half the price that Tomori would. He also had a pretty serious injury that kept him out for quite a while last season, but he came back really strong at the beginning of the year. Now, apparently Newcastle have been told that Chow, it would cost them 40 million euros to prize Chow from AC Milan. I don't think he's worth more than Tomori, to be honest with you. I think he's worth less than Tomori with Tomori's experience and so on. So I don't think 40 million euros seems to be quite realistic for AC Milan. I still think he's valued at the maximum 35 million euros. So let's see if anything comes of that one. But we've still got an interest in him. And interestingly, all the rumours about Tomori himself seem to have started to die down. And we've not heard much more since the initial influx of "we're in for Tomori," which was happening at the weekend. Look, he's a decent player. He is worth the 45 million euros value that AC Milan have got on the player. But I don't think anyone's going to pay that much, to be quite honest with you. But to be quite honest, I just think this was a bit of a whimsical sort of approach. And I don't think we're really in for Tomori, to be honest. But one player that we should be all over, however, a player that's had his fair share of injuries, is Chelsea's Trevor Chalobah. Now, look, he was left out of the Chelsea squad that just went off to their US tour the other day. So he's definitely up for sale. That goes without saying. And despite the rumours that Chelsea would want potentially up to about £35 million for the player, I think a more reasonable offer of 25 to 30 million could prize the player away from Chelsea. His injury record could scupper any hopes that Chelsea may have for a £35 million price tag. He missed 32 games from the start of last season. Well, you work it out yourself. He missed almost the whole of last season. Look, he was back at beginning of February. He missed the games because of a thigh injury. He was back at the beginning of February. And when he did come back, he looked rather good. He looked rather solid. He looked rather stable. He put in some really decent performances at the end of the season. Look, right-footed, could easily play alongside Max Kilman. I know I've just talked about other players that have had injuries, and I've had question marks over them. But there's something about Chalobah that makes me think he might be worth a punt. But apparently, there are 3 Premier League clubs who are going to be playing in Europe next season that also have an interest in him. At a guess, I think that would probably be Newcastle, who are looking for a centre back, Man United, who are looking for a centre back, and maybe Spurs as well. So that's the players that we're all rumoured to be linked to. But what about some players that are rumoured to be going? Well, here we go again. Lazy Journalism has suggested that now that Arne Slot has brought in coach John Heitinga at Liverpool, Heitinga's going to work his magic and convince Mohamed Kudus to come to Liverpool this summer. Look, one of the reasons why 2 and 2 have been put together to make 5 is because Mohamed Kudus praised Heitinga. He talked about him when he was at Ajax, talked about him at West Ham, praised him quite highly about his coaching techniques and all that. And all of a sudden, journalists are beginning to think that Slot is going to get Heitinga to grab Kudus to come to Liverpool this summer. It won't happen. We understand that despite our concerns about cash flow and how much money we might have on buying players, etc., that we're not going to be selling Mohamed Kudus anytime soon. Well, maybe next summer, but not this one. And another interesting story that came up the other day is that 2 of the biggest clubs in Saudi Arabia are looking for a goalie, and they've worked their way through. I think it was Edison at Man City that they wanted, but they wouldn't agree a fee for him, and they're working through a number of targets, and one of those targets is Alphonse Areola. But the report doesn't identify which of the 2 clubs, Al Ittihad and Al Nazir, which of those 2 clubs are actually looking to buy Areola. I'm not so sure about this story. I'm beginning to wonder if this is a bit more nonsensical than the Kudus story, or maybe they're on a par, because I just don't really think that either of them are really have any element of truth in them, to be honest. And then we have Nayef Aguerd. We've been told that Atletico Madrid are due to make an offer for the centre back. Well, we've been waiting for a good few days now for Atletico Madrid to make a bid for the player. This, of course, creates an issue for us pursuing other centre backs whilst he's still there, or whilst him and I've forgotten his name, the other centre back, Zuma. Whilst both those players are there, we can't get another centre back in. I just wonder, with all these centre back links, is that really the case? Are we waiting to move one on before we actually confirm a bid for another player? It's possible, but we're waiting for the Atletico to make a bid. And my understanding is that even if they do, they're going to make a very low ball bid. We rate the player, or we value the player, at something like £30 million. That's what we want for him. That's what we paid for him. My understanding is that Atletico will come in well under £20 million for the player because, of course, everyone's worried about his wages. So they want to bid as low as possible in order to afford his wages. I dare say, and I said it the other day, if we get a reasonable offer for Aguerd, we might even look to subsidize part of his salary for maybe the first season or so. Atletico are going to make either a low ball bid, or the other approach they're going to take is they're going to want to loan him with an option to buy. That doesn't suit us at all. There's no need for us to sell to let Aguerd go. It wouldn't suit us. It wouldn't suit us to let Aguerd go on a loan to buy deal, unless, of course, we do what we did with Debo and look to loan to buy another player. So that will kind of balance itself out. Let's see what happens with that one as well. That's the update. I dare say by the time this goes out on Thursday morning, there are going to be many, many other stories that are going to come about that I'm going to have to do another video on. It's getting a little bit frustrating. I won't deny, I would really, really love to see another signing. Now, I'm going to have to say the fifth signing, because we need to include Andy Irving in on this now, because with Foderingham in, with Max Kilman in, that we've had, with Guilherme in as well, we've got to save Irving, even though he's not been officially announced, is kind of our fourth signing this summer. So I'm waiting for our fifth and sixth and maybe seventh signing this summer. We really do need at least a minimum another 3 players. We all know the positions: right back, another centre back, an attacking left-sided midfielder, and a striker. Well, that's 4. Are we going to get them? I think we'll get most of them, to be quite honest with you. I think maybe, if anything, it may be a centre back that we might have to sacrifice and go with the players that we've got. We're going to have to put faith in Mavropanos, Kilman, Aguerd, and Zuma. Now, of those 4, I can't see Zuma playing that much. But ironically, like I've said before, if we don't sell Aguerd, he is the kind of centre back that Lopetegui would be looking for in this transfer window. Let's see what happens. Thank you all for watching. Like I said, if you're new to the channel, please do hit the like button. Please do hit the subscribe button. Please become a subscriber of the channel, and I'll be back very soon. Thank you for watching, and have a good rest of the day.